Hello, all EMF warriors out there. This is Mr. Spock coming to you from Oregon, middle of Oregon, on a 23-degree Fahrenheit day. I'm out here in sunlight, and as most of you know, I have electrosensitivities, and these electrosensitivities mainly affect my ears and my eyes, so I'm getting the IR light from the sun this morning and doing a podcast with another person. Her name's Belinda, and she also has developed some electrosensitivities just in the last year or so here. Belinda, do you want to say hi to everybody?
Hi, everybody.
So I this is going to be a very interesting story for people to hear because, oftentimes for people to develop EHS or electrosensitivities, it takes, often half a lifetime, really. And me, it didn't work that way. I developed it in my late 20s. But Belinda experienced something recently that she was awoken to this issue of EMFs. And first of all, I just want to say I'm really grateful that you've come on the show today to talk and share your story, Belinda. And
Problem.
yeah, and also, this particular story is pretty unique and something a lot of people can relate to if they get an MRI done. So, as most of you know, MRIs, it's short for magnetic resonance imaging. It's a procedure you go into to um, you know, look and scan to see if anything is up in your body. Really, the physics behind it's pretty simple. Well, it's not really simple, but what's happening is the certain atoms are turning a certain direction, and they also use radio frequencies to be able to image what's going on inside the body. So let's start with I'm basically going to start this interview with you just to kind of get a background that I'm really interested in what led you to the MRI initially.
So it was, I was at college, at university, and I was studying, I was doing my dissertation on a biology related subject. So I was in the lab using lots of different chemicals and actually had a chemical splash to the eye. And when I went to get that checked out, the doctor who I saw thought that I had another condition, which I don't actually have, but that was why I was put in the MRI scan.
Oh, interesting. So before the MRI entirely, let's say, back when you were a kid or, in your teenage years, did you ever have any electrosensitivities, any noticing any issues around electronics or anything like that, of those sorts?
Not at all, no. Excuse me. I was just a normal 90s child, should I say. I grew up with computers, or they grew up with me. And at university, I permanently had a phone attached to my hand, was always on the computer, living in an environment which a lot of students would live in, Wi-Fi on constantly, just a really average environment that a lot of people live in this day and age. So I had absolutely no awareness of electrosensitivity or that it was even a thing. And the MRI scan to me did not alert any concerns in terms of the exposure to the magnetic field or to the radio frequency. Obviously, an MRI is not a pleasant procedure for anyone to have to go through, but I had absolutely no awareness of what I was letting myself in for.
I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when did this happen? When did you actually, go into the MRI? It was like maybe a year and a half ago. Is that about right?
Yeah, it was February 2016.
Right, right.
Um,
So let's fast forward to the week after the MRI. I'm really curious, what started happening to you at that point?
when I went into the MRI scan and actually was in the machine, when the noise started, which I believe is the radio frequency, I'm not 100% sure how it works, but when the scan was operational, should I say, and the scan sequencing had started, I had this really bizarre sensation where my whole body sort of began to quiver uncontrollably, which I believe through research is peripheral nerve stimulation. I'm not 100% certain what was happening, but it kind of felt like I was being shocked, having an electric shock of some sort of thing. It was really bizarre. And I got that far as to get in the machine, have the procedure done. I didn't want to have to reschedule, so I just grit my teeth and put up with it. I mean, it was of the head area, so it was only 20 minutes long, and I just put up with it. And weirdly enough, when I got out of the scan, I sat upright. I felt really odd, and I had quite a sort of strange pulling sensation sort of on the top of my scalp. I can't really describe it. It wasn't painful at that point, but it was strange. It felt like a lump or something had developed on the top. And then I left the scan just feeling really drained and dazed. But at the time, I just thought it's probably just shock. A couple of people in the waiting room commented that I looked really pale. And I couldn't hear because it was so loud, it temporarily deafened me. So that was highly unpleasant. When I got home, though, that's when the symptoms started to really come out. First of all, I began to develop this intense itching all over. And when I scratched, my skin had become so fragile that it actually bled.
Wow.
And I know that this sounds gruesome. I mean, it was gruesome. It was just horrifying, really. And at first, it sounds naive, but I thought that it was because my fingernails were too sharp. It just didn't occur to me that there could be a problem with my skin, because my skin's always been my skin, it's just skin. So I started trimming my fingernails and filing them, and then I thought I scratched again, still absolute agony, you know, and I just thought, no, this isn't my fingernails, this is really, really weird. And then over the next few hours, I started to get this burning sensation sort of inside my ears. It spread outward. And before long, after a few hours, I went bright red, and it looked just like I'd spent too long on a sunbed. That's the best way that I can describe it.
Yeah.
To, you know.
Geez, that's almost like close to horrifying to understand this is happening. But it sounds like to me you had like a nice direct correlation for, obviously to the event, everything happening, and what led right after it. So what was your initial thoughts? Were you like, okay, how do I fix this? And also, I'll get to another question later about EMF Warriors, but I'm also really curious what led you down the path to actually finding EMF Warriors and finding other groups to maybe potentially start to heal yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So at first, like you say, it was just complete horror, disbelief, because what shortly followed this burning and seeing myself morph and my body change, it was that I began to get a sort of severe sickness, like flu-like, and I actually became very, very ill. Complan saved my life, which for those of you who don't know what Complan is, it's like Slim Fast. It's a meal replacement, sort of powdered meal replacement. And I managed to keep that down with the aid of anti-sickness tablets. So I did drop. I mean, I was about 7 stone because I'm very petite, as you can probably see, but I'm back to my normal weight now, which you'll be pleased to know. But I dropped down to about 5 stone by the time I eventually changed my living environment, which we will probably get onto later. But yeah, there was a lot more than just these bizarre, horrifying and confusing symptoms. There was this sickness, this debilitating exhaustion, this flu-like symptoms that just went on and on for about a 2-month period. And I think that at that time I was very powerless to do much. I was in shock. I was not sure what was happening, and the only thing I could do really was just about muster the energy to just begin an online search. And it was during that period that I found a forum entry of somebody who had very similar symptoms to me when following his MRI scan. And he'd actually mentioned the word electro-hypersensitivity, and I thought, what's that? So I highlighted and clicked Google search. Yeah, it's completely new to me. And I started to read, and I thought, this is a thing, So of course, my initial thoughts were, I've been burnt, that the magnetic field, possibly there was an electric current. I don't quite understand the physics of it, but there's certainly the possibility of radio frequency burns, which are the most common form of injury in MRI scans I've since learned. And so my first thoughts were, I need to keep food down, I need to rest, and I need to give my body the maximum chance of recovery. But of course, when I learned about electrosensitivity, and I figured that actually a lot of allergies and sensitivities begin when the body has had an assault of some sort, I thought, I need to get out of here. I need to get out of this flat full of Wi-Fi and go somewhere where my body stands at least some chance of healing.
Yeah.
So that did.
Yeah, totally. So another question for you. So when during those first couple months, when you had some, we were like really deep down having these injuries and these things that were happening, like what was your support system like, and like around, like what was going on in your life at that time? Because I know recently you graduated. So was this like at the most inopportune time on top of like, you know, or was it actually in a nice period where, it's never a nice period to experience it, but it seems like you were like under also a lot of, you know, educational issues to like try to get your degree and everything. Is that true at that time?
Absolutely, yes, that's completely true. I was in the last 10 weeks of my degree. I was just coming up to the completion of my final year project, hence the chemical splash. I I had all my exams coming up, and to be honest, I was under pressure, but I was actually in a very happy place before the scan because I was so looking forward to summer. I'd worked really hard, I'd got really good grades up until that point, and I had absolutely everything to look forward to. So it was like having the carpet pulled out from under my feet. What
Yeah,
happened completely turned my world around. The support network was not there because my family just did not understand, and I don't think it's a case that they didn't care. I think it's a case that they had absolute disbelief. I don't think anyone could quite believe. I went in for a 20-minute, what some people would class as routine medical scan, and came out fighting for my life. So that was really hard, and there was the emotional impact of that. There was also the battle in my conscience. Do I put, when I found out about EHS, I thought, well, I shouldn't be using a computer, but I couldn't just run away from it because the rules with the university are if you don't sit your assessments, you have to retake the whole year. I was so close to the finish, so there was a part of me that still continued to try and struggle on. And with support, I did have support from some of my university colleagues, who I am eternally grateful for carrying me through those last couple of assessments that we did as groups. But when it became apparent that I was not going to be able to continue university, the university were very good and they postponed my assessments to the following year. So I was able to actually go back and complete it the following year.
I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, like it's interesting. Like anybody that develops EHS or a form of it, electrosensitivity, something where their body's suffering, typically it's like a longer road, and you can like pad other people in your life, like knowing, like letting them know that, hey, I've got these issues. I really don't want to have the phone near my head because I might, eye issues might manifest, like for in me, like in my case. But like in your case, it was like immediate, like MRI. Then the next few weeks, you're like direly sick. You're losing weight. You have all these problems. But you would think, I think that the empathy part of this equation is really interesting, because you said that your inner network of people, they're watching you go through this, but they have this paradigm. They have this almost disbelief that, wait a minute, how can these two things, like how can either radio frequency or magnetic fields correlate to somebody being injured? So if like that alone, just the mental stuff that as sufferers we like go through, that I've gone through and I've watched other people go through, that alone is challenging, aside from the physical problems with it. So what else during, the last like literally 9 months or so, like it sounds like, did it go from like, was it, ebbs and flows, or was it more like all an uphill battle to get people to be more aware of what happened, or are they still kind of like in disbelief of your situation even to this day?
Okay, so I think that the best way to answer this would be to say that I have separated my friends and family into those who have to know about what happened because they were there at the time, and those who don't have to know. And unfortunately, I don't know whether it's part of the fact that I suffer from post-traumatic stress, or whether it's just something that is a sort of natural defense mechanism that's in all of us. I tend not to tell everyone that doesn't need to know the full story, even though I'm telling you all now. it's just, this is this has provided a platform to enable me to explain myself. But of course, to most people, it's just not worth it, so that's dealt with in a very inadequate way, but is so that I can survive. But for my close friends and family, this is going to sound a bit mad, but actually, I think explaining that there was possibly an electrosensitivity element to what had happened actually helped them to believe it, because I do surround myself with people and my own family who we're quite open-minded. We're all quite similar, quite intellectual, like to read. And I think my close family, some of my close family members did have enough common sense and basic understanding of biology and physics to realise that electrosensitivity absolutely is a real thing. But I think when it was just came out of medical scan, unexplained symptoms, it was just terrifying for everybody concerned. So I think that's when there was a slight sort of shift. And what's interesting is that for me, my electrosensitivity symptoms, I started to notice when I removed myself from that environment that I was in, are quite wrapped up with the symptoms that came from the scan that I'm not 100% sure are purely electrosensitivity, such as burn injury. But since I've subjected some of my family members to this new clean living, when they have to now go into an environment which is an onslaught of Wi-Fi, noise, artificial lights, all those sort of things, they say, "Oh, I couldn't sleep. Oh, I felt terrible." So I think that eventually, over time, it's gone in that electrosensitivity is a real thing. But yes, it's a slow process. You can't expect to just turn around and say, "I'm allergic to your phone. Could you put it away, please?" and not expect everyone to give you a bit of a strange look.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like with a lot of people that suffer EHS or electrosensitivities, like we find that getting into certain environments, we just can feel the difference. Now, I'm talking like the majority, that like almost all of the public will not experience electrosensitivities until they really become entrained to the EMFs around them over longer periods of time, typically. In my, like this is kind of the old adage of like going on vacation, which a lot of people call the oldest biohack in the book, because if you're you happen to be living in an environment saturated in EMF, but you don't realize it, but you just go on vacation or you go camping, you get out in the middle of nowhere, you suddenly feel like, oh wait, I'm sleeping more soundly, I feel better, my health's improving, and it's more like the subtle things are going on. But it sounds like with you back, like, when you're really in the depth of your sickness, it sounded like you had more sensitivity to the EMF. Or I'm really curious if you had moved, like, or gotten away in the last few months to actually experience a difference between living in the place you have been living in, or the place you are traveling to or going away from, to notice any symptom changes.
Yeah, so when the scan happened, I was, like I explained, I was living in a block of flats. Everybody had Wi-Fi, just a standard 21st century living environment, really. Massive floodlights in the car park right outside the window, just a lot of things. We had electric heating as well. The whole flat was run by electric. So it was difficult to discern what was symptoms from the scan and what was symptoms from electrosensitivity, because everything at once was happening. I had become injured from the scan, and I also was living in a very unsuitable environment for any human to live in, let alone somebody who had just come out of this assault from the scan. It was when I actually removed myself from that environment, went back to live in a rural area, switch all the electricity off at night, no Wi-Fi, no street lights, just a good environment, a good clean environment, that I began to actually make an improvement. I started to be able to keep my food down. I was able to put weight on. I got my physical strength back, a lot of it back. And I still do have ongoing symptoms, such as the burning pain all over my body. It's mainly worse on my scalp, but it's still present. But I'm able to see possibly what's improvement from the scan and what's possibly being aggravated from electrical devices a lot more easily. So now, for example, I'll just have quite a few days in my clean environment, and everything will be okay. I'm doing okay. My symptoms are quite low grade. You know, they're manageable. And I have to keep my exercise levels quite high as well. I find that really helps, and I'm able to do that. But when I then go to an environment which is unsuitable and spend a couple of days there, I can then feel the Wi-Fi. I can feel it tapping on me. That's the best way to describe it. I feel like it's tapping on me, and I feel quite shaky. I feel quite, it just feels like I've had a few drinks. That's really what it feels like in terms of my whole body. And then the nerve pain will rear up and my scalp will really hurt. As well, if I use a phone sometimes for too long, texting or something like that, then I can start to feel the nerve pain rearing up. And so I'm able, now that I've removed myself from that awful environment, to see, actually, I think a sensitivity has developed. But overall, my health gradually improved over the period of the last year and 10 months. So whether that's because the distance from the scan is increasing and so therefore the body's healing, or whether that's actually because I've removed myself from the environment, is hard to tell. But I think removing myself from the environment certainly gave my body a fighting chance to undergo the healing that was necessary.
Yeah, that makes a perfect sense to me. Like many of us that are like mitochondriacs or biohackers, like we know, we've been around this issue for quite a while, that we actually know that there's strategies we put in place before we subject ourselves to a higher EMF or non-native EMF environment. So, you know, the airplane, like flying on a modern airplane with Wi-Fi inside the metal tube, right? Or like the MRI, or like even people that go to work and have a job where they're subjecting themselves to a ton of screens in front of them with Wi-Fi and everything else going on. Like it's almost a daily ritual for some of us to, you know, just get out like I'm doing now in the sun and hydrating a lot more and kind of more preparing for what the modern world has given us. I'm curious if there's any additional things you might have done with your own personal behaviors, like to this day, or is it kind of like what you said? You're just kind of trying to keep your distance, trying to like change your environments and getting away from things. But I'm curious about your strategy moving forward. Is it going to be more about personal behaviors and like the choice of lighting and time of day when you use these things, or is it going to be you know, everything you can get? Are you still like researching all this?
No, I'm still in the process of researching it, absolutely. I've got a lot of reading to do. It's all been very overwhelming, trying to finish my degree at the same time, etc. So yeah, I've still got a long way to go in terms of learning the biohacks, but I absolutely want to embrace them because I think anyone should, leave alone someone with electro-sensitivities or injuries from that kind of thing. But yes, I think moving away from that environment into a cleaner environment has just been my constant strategy. So I can actually cope now going to somebody else's house in the city. I can cope with spending a few days there, and I honestly never thought I would be able to, but because my environment between times is good, I'm able to get up my strength. And actually, yeah, if I've spent a good amount of time in a safe environment, and then I went to London recently, I didn't feel any different going to London. I thought, you know, I just slept under streetlights, and you know, I just had Wi-Fi all around me. I used my phone a lot that evening because I was there to see friends. I needed to coordinate where we were. I did ditch my smartphone for many months, but then I just thought, no, I can do this sensibly, as long as I look after myself in the meantime. So I think that's my general strategy. But there have been certain behaviours I've altered, such as exercise, like I mentioned. I'm committed to exercise now that I've got, I mean, it's partly because it's a novelty to have my strength back, but also I am committed because I just think if you are healthy, the healthier you can be, the more healthy you are. You see what I mean? So yeah, I'm much more committed to healthy routines, and like you say, time of day that I use devices. And now, as an exception, I'm under horrendous light. But yeah, I don't use my computer at night anymore. I used to, but now I've let my circadian rhythm readjust to its natural. I sleep when it's dark, and I wake when the sun comes up and wakes me. And I think that's, yeah, it's just the little things like that. And I understand for people, it's really, really hard for them to actually do that when they've got a job, because that's the other thing. I'm not working at the moment, and it's something I'm just not thinking about for now because I'm prioritizing my health. But I would definitely look for something work-wise that I'll be able to fit into my routine, because you're nothing without your health, and that's number one.
Yeah, absolutely. So uh, basically, I think the listeners are going to have a really amazing story hearing all this, because now it's here's an interesting analogy. When I was maybe like 20, 21 years old, back working, or right before I was started working at the university doing biology, I was taught I was taught biochemistry. I really wasn't taught the biophysics side of it. And even at that time, I knew about ionizing versus non-ionizing radiation, and never even thought that, oh, non-ionizing radiation, it's going to be nothing compared to the ionizing, right? So, but, and I had paradigms developed around it, and it really did take me almost more than a decade to have the experience with it, to have an understanding that, wait a minute, some of these high frequency EMFs are pulsed microwave modulated information carrying light signals, frequencies, are gonna have a problem on our health, potentially doing different things. And in light of the later science in the last decade, really it's becoming more undisputable, some of the biological connections. But moving forward in this world, as we're just expanding all of this, I'm curious, like, what your views are on the technology side of it. Do you think things are going to become more inescapable there in the UK, or if they are not already? And um, just like getting the message out to the public, do you have any insights to offer people about really how we get this issue out so people are aware of it just in the mainstream?
Yes, I think that it's going to become inescapable, as you say. In the UK, the government have promised a rollout of super fast broadband to all areas, including very rural areas. And sadly, in order to meet those promises, one of the solutions is to install masts in village locations rather than the very expensive task of improving the fibre optic broadband. Yeah, it's terrifying, really, because at the moment there's going to be nowhere to hide very soon. Smart meters are becoming a requirement to have them installed in all houses, and I think that the issue is just going to continue to proliferate until perhaps the cost of poor health eventually outweighs the potential profit from the telecommunications industry. I think in terms of the general public, it's an uphill battle, really, because I think the general public, it's not that they don't understand or they can't understand or they don't believe it. I do think that the general public are open-minded and would believe it, but I think at the moment it's a case of not wanting to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
They have been told by the government, and the general consensus is non-ionizing radiation is not harmful. So you've got two sets of research. Perhaps you've got that which was funded by the telecommunications company, which says it's not harmful, no biological effects. It's actually what some of them say, all of them. And then you've got the research which says, well, here are the biological effects, and this is exactly how the process works. Here it is for you to see. And of course, that's freely available. That's the great thing about the internet. But the public obviously want to be blinkered to the one that says their phone's bad. In fact, I can understand that. It's not just their phone, it's their whole living environment that's apparently bad. Well, everything's bad. Bacon's apparently carcinogenic. It's just crazy. So people understandably go, oh, but there's one here that says that it's safe. So cool. We'll just listen to that one. And I think it is sadly not till the government eventually start to campaign like they did with smoking, that the public are going to be on board en masse. But I am hoping that the few of us that are probably listening today can start to instigate change from the bottom up.
Yeah, and that's pretty much at the root of EMF Warriors, to just get the word out to people. But what you just said is really interesting. My take on it is, and what you just said is perfect, is there are all of these potential stressors that we're exposed to all the time, biochemically and through the biophysics, through just the strange light mechanics we're being hit with. And what really isn't really been done too much is the synergies of what happens when one person happens to be in an environment where they have mold in their house. They have just, they happen to work somewhere where they're just saturated all day long in EMFs. They come home and they live by a cell phone tower mast, within a few blocks away from their home. and you get this more oxidative stress, just more damage to the body. And then fast forward a few months, even a year or two later, suddenly a person comes down with an ailment and of course attributes it to the latest cold bug or flu or something that comes in. And then, you know, the problem doesn't go away, and then they just feel more lethargic and down. And like a lot of people that are living in these environments perpetually, they don't know what's going on. I see it from the angle of a lot of synergies hitting them, and hence the reason why escaping from your current environment you're in is really one of the best tests on the planet to find out, do I feel better living somewhere for a few weeks away from the current environments I'm putting myself in. So with that, is there any last things you want to tell people before we end this? I think I've got a lot of good stuff coming in here. I think everybody's going to really enjoy this one because it's such a unique perspective on electrosensitivities that most people just don't experience, right?
Yeah, I hope so. And I also hope that the fact that I'm quite young and I've got a phone, I was at university when it happened, I was just a normal student. I hope that sort of resonates with the listeners, because I definitely think that there is a sort of preconception about electro-hypersensitivity, that it's middle-aged hippies that just want to live in a mud hut and they're going to use that as an excuse because people on the train are annoying them talking on their mobile phones. And it's not that at all. You know, and the more I read about biophysics, the more I actually understand, and I have a lot of reading to do, but the more I understand that this is a very real phenomenon, and a very real problem that's facing us all. So yeah, I hope that I've helped. I don't want to say inspire, because I wouldn't want to inspire anyone to have electrosensitivity, but to relate and to understand, you know, if you are suffering with symptoms, you might not realize they are electrosensitivity, but if you are suffering with common symptoms that a lot of people have, then there is the possibility that there is something you can do about that by changing your environment, and it's not as much of a daunting task as it may first appear.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Belinda, for sharing your story. And in the future here at EMF Warriors, we want to actually get more people on with unique stories, because really we all have individual stories to tell how the EMFs are affecting us in just a vast different number of ways, but we're connecting enough dots to know that we're seeing common sources from the biophysics coming in and affecting us. Well, Belinda, thanks again.
Thank you very much.
All right. You have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.